Hello there and welcome to my channel. My name is Soibi. I'm broadcaster, actor and voiceover artist. Hope you're doing great. Although it hasn't been great really for those who've been displaced, who are in shock and danger, perhaps every single day in places like Ukraine, for example. I truly pray that every survivor remains safe and that God guides and protects them. Also that those who have lost loved ones and property find a way to heal and get back on their feet. Now, it has been a few months since the Russia-Ukraine crisis and invasion began. Russia has gotten a lot of sanctions already, and she's likely to get even more. The U.S. and allies are heavily backing Ukraine by sending military aid. Putin has accused the U.S. of fighting a proxy war, and while the whole world is watching these events and wondering how the U.S. and NATO would respond in the near future, and if there's going to be a third world war, of course, nobody wants that. However, on this episode of the Showdown, I've decided to do a matchup, Joe Biden versus Vladimir Putin, analyzing what the likely outcome would be if these two, and maybe their countries, had a direct confrontation. Now, one brings chemical weapons, like Novichok. The other brings policies. Alright, I'm just kidding. If you've ever wondered what will happen and how these two leaders would respond, attack, counterattack, and defend, I'm here to analyze who would likely emerge victorious if these two actually had a full-blown war. For today's matchup, I'll be using slightly different classification themes compared to my previous videos. I'll be analyzing them and rating them in 7 key domains, which are 1. Leadership, 2. Economic resources, 3. Weapons, 4. Military experience of both leaders, 5. Intelligence gathering and combat experience of the military, 6. Armies in terms of numbers and capacity, and 7. Allies. Now these are the 7 rounds, and which of these heavyweights will be left standing at the end? We'll find out. Before we go further, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're new to my channel. If you like this video, you'd enjoy my other videos as well, so do well to check them out. Also, don't forget to like, share, and comment on this video. Thank you. Now that being said, we can now get into the fun part of this video. We'll start with leadership. Now, first of all, I'll give some brief background about both leaders. Born on the 7th of October 1952, Vladimir Putin grew to become a Russian politician and former intelligence officer who is the president of Russia, a position he has filled since 2012 and previously from 2000 to 2008. He was also the prime minister from 1999 to 2000 and again from 2008 to 2012. So we know he worked as a KGB foreign intelligence officer for 16 years, rising to the rank of lieutenant colonel before resigning in 1991 to begin his political career in St. Petersburg. Fast forward to April 2021. Following a referendum, he signed into law constitutional amendments, including one that would allow him to run for re-election twice more, potentially extending his presidency to 2036. Guys, let's face it, I don't think Putin is a Russian. He's an African dictator. Anyways, let's look at leadership traits. Now, did you know that during Putin's first tenure as president, the Russian economy grew on average by 7% per year, following economic reforms and a 5-fold increase in the price of oil and gas? Putin led Russia during the Second Chechen War, restoring federal control of Chechnya. As prime minister under Medvedev, he oversaw military reform and police reform, as well as Russia's victory in its war against Georgia. During his third term as president, Russia annexed Crimea and sponsored a war in eastern Ukraine with several military incursions made, resulting in international sanctions and a financial crisis in Russia. During his fourth term as president, his government responded to the COVID-19 pandemic and he presided over a military buildup on the border of Ukraine. Now in February 2022, Putin ordered a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, leading to international condemnation and isolation, as well as expanded sanctions, causing a financial crisis in Russia and calls for the prosecution of Putin for war crimes. On the other hand, Joseph Biden Jr., born November 20th, 1942, is an American politician who is the 46th and current president of the United States. A member of the Democratic Party, he served as the 47th vice president from 2009 to 2017 under Barack Obama and represented Delaware in the United States Senate from 1973 to 2009. Wow, that's a whole lifetime. Now, he ran successfully for the Democratic presidential nomination in 1988 and 2008. Biden was re-elected to the Senate 6 times and was the 4th most senior sitting senator at the time when he became Obama's vice president after they won the 2008 presidential election, defeating John McCain and his running mate Sarah Palin. Obama and Biden were re-elected in 2012, defeating Mitt Romney and his running mate Paul Ryan. During his 8 years as vice president, Biden leaned on his Senate experience and frequently represented the administration in negotiations with congressional Republicans, including on the Budget Control Act of 2011, which resolved a debt ceiling crisis, and the American Taxpayer Relief Act of 2012, which addressed the impending fiscal cliff. He also oversaw infrastructure spending in 2009 to counteract the Great Recession. On foreign policy, Biden was a close counselor to the president and took a leading role in designing the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq in 2011. In 2017, Obama awarded Biden the Presidential Medal of Freedom with distinction. Now, he and his running mate Kamala Harris defeated incumbent President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence in the 2020 presidential election. He's the oldest president and the first to have a female vice president. His early presidential activity centered around proposing, lobbying for, and signing into law the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 to help the United States recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing recession. He completed the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan by September 2021. Now, during the withdrawal, the Afghan government collapsed and the Taliban seized control. A major foreign policy miscalculation, if you ask me. In response to the February 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, Biden led the imposition of international sanctions on Russia, authorizing over $1 billion in U.S. weapons shipments to Ukraine. Obviously, Biden seems very different from Putin, a softer and more diplomatic version. Now, speaking of results, I'll say Putin gets credit in the way he made Russia a force to be reckoned with. He was handed a much less powerful Russia, and he transformed her into one of the leading world powers at one point, even economically. Now, somehow, it seems Joe Biden was handed a country that wasn't really facing any serious threats, except for COVID. Biden started out strong in the honeymoon phase of his presidency, entered into office 9 months into a recovery from the COVID-19 recession, and his first year in office was characterized by robust growth in real GDP, employment, wages, and stock market returns, amid significantly elevated inflation. Now, real GDP grew 5.7%, the fastest rate in 37 years. Amid record job creation, the unemployment rate fell at the fastest pace on record during the year. By the end of 2021, inflation reached a nearly 40-year high of 7.1%, which was partially offset by the highest wage and salary growth in at least 20 years. Income growth was particularly strong at the low end of the pay scale. However, it seems things haven't been as rosy for Biden of late. According to recent polls by Gallup.com, only 41% of US adults approve of the job Joe Biden is doing as president, similar to his 40% rating for handling foreign affairs, while approval of his handling the economy and the situation with Russia are slightly lower. However, Americans gave Biden better marks for his response to the coronavirus, but still, fewer than half approve. Now, personally, I haven't been impressed with Biden, particularly in his handling of foreign policy. His withdrawal from Afghanistan and the manner in which it was executed is a strategic blunder. His handling of the Ukraine crisis and escalation leaves a lot to be desired, but so are many of his administration's actions across the globe. U.S. foreign policy during the Biden administration has somehow abandoned allies, strengthened adversaries, and put U.S. national security at risk. Now, about Putin, months after launching a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, it is increasingly evident Putin has made a huge strategic misjudgment that potentially threatens the political survival of the authoritarian regime in Moscow. Having failed to obtain a lightning victory the Putin regime expected, the Russian military has resorted to encircling Ukrainian cities and blindly pounding them with artillery and missile strikes. To date, Putin's war has already destroyed billions worth of infrastructure in Ukrainian cities and caused the deaths of thousands of Ukrainian civilians. Russia, on the other hand, has also lost large amounts of equipment and sustained thousands of casualties. Moreover, several highly decorated Russian generals have been killed by Ukrainian forces. It's apparent any attempt to establish a pro-Putin government in Ukraine will be fiercely resisted and necessitate a large Russian occupying force in a country of around 42 million people. Yet, Moscow does not have the political legitimacy or economic resources to sustain an occupation against a nationwide insurgency in Ukraine. The Putin regime's invasion has triggered crippling international sanctions on Russia. Now, Moscow's central bank no longer has access to the hard currency it needs to bolster the country's banking system and steady the ruble. Hundreds of international companies have curtailed or withdrawn their business operations from Russia. Now, such measures are already affecting living standards, with some goods rationed and shortages in key components from the West reportedly leading to factory stoppages. When it comes down to leadership, it's a bit tricky to choose who would win. Because yes, even though both leaders have made some major miscalculations of late, Putin has made more grave errors by invading Ukraine. If I carried out this comparison sometime last year, before the war in Ukraine of course, I would probably give Putin the edge when it comes to leadership in context of a war situation, because he just had this air of mystery around him, a je ne sais quoi factor. Now, however, that seems to have somewhat diminished, considering the sheer weight and severity of the unjustifiable invasion, the damage it has caused not just Ukraine, but even Russia, its people, its economy, and the global economy. I mean, it's obvious Putin has been caught by surprise. He's in over his head, and for a leader, that's almost unforgivable. So Biden wins on leadership, not because he's necessarily been outstanding or exemplary, but because Putin shot himself in the foot. Pun intended. Now, in a war situation between two leaders and their countries, economic resources is a key factor, a lifeline to determining who would be able to stay in the fight longer. So let's look at the economic resources of both countries to give you an idea of the resources each leader has at his disposal. According to the International Monetary Fund, the U.S. GDP of $22.7 trillion constitutes 24% of gross world product at market exchange rates and over 16% of the gross world product at purchasing power parity (PPP). On February 2, 2022, the United States had a national debt of $30 trillion. That's a lot. Well, it doesn't seem the creditors are coming to the doorstep anytime soon. Now, did you know the United States is the largest importer of goods and second largest exporter, though exports per capita are relatively low? In 2010, the total U.S. trade deficit was $635 billion. Canada, China, Mexico, Japan, and the European Union are its top trading partners. From 1983 to 2008, U.S. real compounded annual GDP growth was 3.3%, compared to a 2.3% weighted average for the rest of the G7. The country ranks 5th in the world in nominal GDP per capita and 7th in GDP per capita at PPP. The US dollar is the world's primary reserve currency. The United States ranked 3rd in the Global Innovation Index in 2021 after Switzerland and Sweden. Accounting for 4.24% of the global population, Americans collectively possess 29.4% of the world's total wealth. Amazing, the largest percentage of any country. The US also ranks first in the number of billionaires and millionaires in the world, with 724 billionaires and 10.5 million millionaires as of 2020. There are actually more millionaires in the US than the population of many countries. Now just imagine a country where everyone is super rich. Now, we know the Russian Federation is a transcontinental country spanning Eastern Europe and Northern Asia. It is the largest country in the world by area, covering over 17,125,191 square kilometers and encompassing 1/8 of Earth's inhabitable landmass. Russia extends across 11 time zones and borders 16 sovereign nations, the most of any country in the world. It is the 9th most populous country and the most populous country in Europe, with a population of 145.5 million. Its GDP is $4.1 trillion. However, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, thinks the Russian economy will shrink 8.5% in 2022 and 2.3% in 2023. Russia has been widely described as an energy superpower. It has the world's largest proven gas reserves, the 2nd largest coal reserves, the 8th largest oil reserves, and the largest oil shale reserves in Europe. Russia is also the world's leading natural gas exporter, the second largest natural gas producer, and the second largest oil producer and exporter. Now, Russia is the world's fourth largest electricity producer and the ninth largest renewable energy producer in 2019. It was also the world's first country to develop civilian nuclear power and to construct the world's first nuclear power plant. Russia was also the world's fourth largest nuclear energy producer in 2019 and was the fifth largest hydroelectric producer in 2021. Russia's agricultural sector alone contributes about 5% of the country's total GDP, although the sector employs about 1/8 of the total labor workforce. Following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the country has faced international sanctions and corporate boycotts in a move described as an all-out economic and financial war to isolate the Russian economy from the global financial system. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has estimated the damage done by the sanctions triggered the greatest supply shock since at least the early 1970s and will retract Russia's economy by 10% in 2022. Some estimates have suggested the sanctions will cost the Russian economy 30 years of development and reduce the country's living standards for the next 5 years. I think with all these, it's safe to say the US has the stronger economy right now, and that gives you an idea of how much Biden can add to his war chest. Therefore, in the domain of economic resources, Biden wins.